So hello, I'm very happy to be part of this conference, which we thought would take place much earlier, I guess last year, and take place on site. But current times make our lives less predictable, which is also kind of a lesson. And I'm happy to present my thoughts on the measurement of statistical literacy, which I'm already thinking about before Corona started, just for you to know. And the big goal would be to have statistical literacy measurements in PIAC survey. Why? I will let you know in about a minute. So let's start with my short structure. First, we have to define statistical literacy. As you will see, it's not that easy to define that. And then second, we go on with the significance. Why shall we measure statistical literacy? Third step is showing you the initial attempts of measurement, because there were already attempts to measure it. And I will discuss with you why these could be improved, should be improved. Then I will give some thoughts about the assessment framework, which is very at the very beginning. So this is also part of the discussion, so to say. And then the last part about some implications of the measurement. So what can be the findings of such a measurement of statistical literacy? Regarding the definition, as it is the case with many other definitions, no consensus has yet been reached. The tricky part about the definition of statistical literacy is that we have to be careful not to confuse statistical literacy with other terms like statistical thinking, statistical reasoning, which sound quite similar but are not the same, and or not even with data literacy, which includes much more knowledge about data ethics, the application of data, and so on. So when we want to focus on statistical literacy, this definition here in the middle is the one I created during my research around that topic, which is the ability to understand and critically analyze statistical information. And here comes the important part, that affects personal or societal areas of relevance and incorporate this information into one's own decision making. That means when we talk about statistical literacy, I do not say that anyone has to understand the support vector machines, the kernel trick in that. And so I mean things which we have to deal with in our personal life and should or could, if we want to, incorporate this into our own decision-making regarding our personal lives. Why is it so important to define statistical literacy exactly? Because the frameworks, the procedures of assessment, and the instruments are based on a fixed definition. So it's important first to fix that definition. Yes, as I said in the beginning, why is it important to measure statistical literacy? Not only since Corona, we know that we have to deal with R factors in the media already before Corona crisis started. Quite often in public election debates, statistics are part of an argument of a politician when he or she states comments about certain circumstances based on data, based on statistics. And sometimes people feel like, this is a number, a quite detailed number, could be right or not. I don't know. I don't know how to check. Yes, there are fact checks coming up now more and more in the media. But what if I would like to check statistical information on my own? Am I capable to do that? So statistical literacy now is an essential competency for citizenship in today's world. It's not only what I say, so many authors say this as well. And the assumption is that the public is generally ill-equipped to consume such information. The point is that this is only an assumption. We do not know in detail how people in general deal with statistical information. So if we say, okay, this capability is not quite well, we have to improve statistical literacy. We first have to measure the status quo, of course, check how is it, yeah? And do we have to improve something? Where do we have to improve and how? So quite a complex thing. And there are initial initial attempts to measure statistical literacy. The first approach by a team of Paris 21, so the Partnership for Statistics development in 2021, they created an indicator based on newspaper archives. So they checked online newspapers, online articles, and evaluated, did they use statistics in their newspapers? They did this for several countries. And their hypothesis was, okay, if a newspaper uses quite a lot of statistical information, then the public is capable of dealing with that statistical information. So the assumption is, if there are many statistical information in a newspaper, then the more or the better is the statistical literacy in that country. The other existing approach to assess statistical literacy is from Social Data Lab, which is a Portuguese company. And they created a statistical literacy index and tried out several questions regarding statistical information, charts, pie charts, whatever, asked questions about that to a sample of people, and then came to the conclusion that, for example, for this Portugal sample, statistical literacy is not pretty well among the population, but only a very few set of questions, very simple, but they give a first idea of what could we ask in the context of statistical literacy. So the goal would be to develop an assessment framework for statistical literacy. We have first ideas to assess student assessment, to assess student capabilities with statistical literacy, but I would love to have this in the PX surveys as well. As I said, there is a rising demand for statistical information, a rising demand of discussion about statistics. So I guess it's time to think about this. It's time to discuss this. And here comes the framework part. It's mainly based on how is going already in PIAC surveys. So when we think about how to assess statistical literacy, let's first think about the context category. So which category should be included to assess the capability? I think there's the private category first, like statistical questions regarding my health, risk for certain diseases, for example, or insurances, for example. So does everyone know that an insurance is a bet based on probabilities? Yeah. Or in the occupational context, is there any data in the company I'm working in which I have to deal with? Yeah, or something like that. Social context categories, something like, as I said, political discussions, political debates, where it's something about national statistics or demographics or whatever, should also be included regarding the context. And last but not least, the context category of scientific context, like regarding the climate, as it is today, Friday and Fridays for future, medicine maybe, or even space science, whatever. So I think this could be several context categories to test for regarding statistical literacy. And I guess there is no need to weigh them, in a certain order. I would say they're equally important, in my opinion. Yeah, but this is part of the discussion. When we think about what could be the cognitive processes people have to carry out when dealing with statistical information, it should be first about understanding it in first stance. And then on the second level, critical reflection. And the upper level, the use and application in my own circumstances may be. And I guess here we should differentiate in the percentage of the items. Like, I guess, biggest part about understanding. Do you understand that given information? Next step, can you critically evaluate it to a lower degree? And then the smallest part about use and application. Yeah, so this is also part of the discussion. Just a first idea from my side on that. And here's the most trickiest part. When we say, okay, we want to measure statistical literacy, we know about the context categories and the things we have to think about. Then we have to go in detail, like, okay, what exactly shall we ask? What is the content exactly? Because statistics is, as I said, from here, percentage to there, support vector machines. So what should people know? That's a good question. And there are several research papers about that who try to find out what is most frequently used in the media, for example. And I searched through the literature and tried to find the base of all the literature that has so far been published on that topic, and found out that this is, so to say, the common part of all the papers on that topic. Like, we should deal first about understanding verbal terminology, percentages, ratios. Does everyone know what's a median? What's the difference between median and mean, for example? What does significant mean? Yeah, this can be content for that level. And then understanding visual displays. We are quite often confronted with graphs in the media or in the any articles in the news. Is everyone capable of reading those graphs and maps? Even I, as a person who's quite often confronted with statistical data and analysis, sometimes I feel when I see a graph in the news like, well, wait a minute, what are the axes? What is it about? Yeah, so it's not that easy as it looks sometimes. Regarding surveys, which are quite often in the media and the results of these surveys, what about biases? What about sponsors? What about the sampling, the representativeness? People should know some things about that to make it possible to question results. Cause and effect, my favorite topic, so to say, correlation versus causation. Is everyone aware of that? Good question. And then chance, of course, the chance that my COVID test is positive, although I'm not infected. Yeah, what about that? The nature of randomness, coincidences, and natural variability. And then conditional probability, which is always the first lecture when my students get confused in statistics lecture, when we start with conditional probabilities, the confusion of the inverse, Bayes theorem, false positive. Of course, this is quite a lot, and I would not say that every citizen has to know about that, but even a little of that would be quite perfect already, I would say. What if we measure this statistical literacy? What can be the findings? What do we do with the findings? Of course, we should go beyond country rankings. For me, it would be not that important. What's the difference between the countries in first stance? For me, it would be more about the school or university curricula. Are we doing right? How we do teach statistics in school and at the university at the moment? What about any educational initiatives for adults? For example, in Germany, we have the KI campus. I think it's created by a research group, also by the Max Planck Institute, but I'm not quite sure at the moment. They have this online campus where you can watch very well-produced videos on KI. So there are initiatives, and should we do something more about that? And I guess what is the main part? I think we would find out if we assess statistical literacy not only in the whole population, but what if we would assess the statistical literacy of journalists, politicians? Would we find out that they are well equipped or not very well? I think there should be training for journalists and politicians, especially to avoid misunderstandings, misuse of statistical information. But yeah, let's see what is the further process of statistical literacy and the assessment. This is part of my biggest research component at the moment. So for now, thank you for your interest and attention. If you feel not like asking questions now, feel free to send your questions to my mail address or ask them now. Thank you so much.